Alright, so now we finish the variation knight c3 when black plays d5. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, f5, knight c3, f takes e4, knight takes e4. And now we look what happens after d5. As I mentioned in one of the previous lectures, we will also analyze the move knight f6. That was, it has been played pretty often the last time. But d5 is the main move, so knight takes e5, d takes e4, knight takes c6. Now queen goes to g5, attacking the bishop b5, white plays queen e2. Black cannot take on g2 because of queen h5 check, so he plays knight f6. Now pawn e4 is protected and square h5 is under control, so the pawn on g2 hangs, and white plays f4. Just to mention, I think I haven't said it before, if, for example, white plays rook g1 or whatever move just to protect the pawn with the idea to go back with his knight or to play d4, black can play a6. This is the point here. And after bishop a4, bishop d7. And now there is no way white can keep the piece. So, knight f6, f4, queen takes f4. Last section covered the move knight e5. And now I want to discuss what happens after d4. Black has two options. He can go to h4 or he can play queen d6. And it turns out that playing queen d6 is better. The point is that after queen h4, g3, queen h3, white doesn't need to play knight e5, because after knight e5, c6, we actually transfer to the other variation, where white plays knight e5 in move number 10. But instead of knight e5, white simply plays bishop g5. That's very strong. Now, a6, bishop goes to a4, bishop d6, so here is an important moment because black cannot play bishop d7. This is what happens usually, but in this situation bishop d7 doesn't work because of bishop takes f6, g takes f6, and queen takes e4. And well, yeah, black is lost. He has to go with king to f7. This is the only move, and then white can play knight e5. Bishop b3 is not so obvious because of king g7, with idea rook e8 and bishop takes c6. But the problem is the move knight e5. F takes e5, and now bishop b3. Bishop b3, bishop e6, rook f1. And after all, white has a very strong compensation. In particular, you can see it after king g8, white has very strong move queen h4. This is the point. He wants to take on h3, and if black takes on h4, then bishop takes e6 check with a great position. So this is why a6 and bishop d7 doesn't work. It is not obvious, but you need to take care. So after bishop a4, black has to play bishop d6, knight e5, c6, and rook f1. And here it is kind of the position of white seems better because the pawn on f6 hangs already. If black castles short, white can play bishop b3, then long castle. In the last section we saw that usually black should play with a long castle. So this is not so nice to play this position. That's why after d4 we go with the queen to d6. Now white goes to e5. Here there is a small trap. After knight takes a7, c6, knight takes c8. Black, of course, doesn't take on c8 because of bishop. Because of bishop d3 or bishop c4. Doesn't matter. Instead of taking on c8, black has very strong move, queen b4. c3, queen takes b5, queen takes b5, c takes b5, and it turns out that the knight is trapped. After knight b6, rook a6, black simply wins the knight on b6, and his position becomes won. That's why knight takes a7 doesn't work. The knight has to go to e5, c6, bishop c4. Now taking the pawn on d4 is incredibly dangerous because of multiple possibilities. First of all, white can play knight f7, attacking the rook. After rook g8 he can go to g5, then he might play bishop e3 and develop very strong initiative. But what he can also do is to play bishop f7, king e7, and bishop f4. And also here I think the position of black is very dangerous. So we don't care about the pawns, we need to develop our pieces. That's why we play bishop e6. White plays c3. Now, of course, he cannot castle short because of queen takes d4 check. Other alternatives are, for example, bishop f4, but then black takes on c4, queen takes c4, and queen d5. With the idea to play long castle, white cannot take on d5 because of c takes d5, and black gets very strong pawn on e4. If white takes on e6, black takes with the queen. So disadvantage of taking on e6 is that black now can play bishop d6 pretty quickly. Short castle. After bishop g5, standard reaction is long castle, attacking pawn d4. Note that white cannot castle long because of queen takes a2. So bishop g5. Bishop g5 long castle doesn't work, so short castle. Bishop e7. Here the point is that we don't want to allow white to play bishop d6 with the idea to take on f6. Here after short castle queen c4, white might get small advantage in the endgame, although still I think the position of black is good playable. But if we can avoid it, then we simply play bishop e7, bishop g5, short castle. Now I think if white takes on f6, then black can take even with a pawn. This might be stronger. And after knight g4, we play f5. And then black will play against pawn d4 with rook a8, c5, and so on. Now short castle. White plays rook e1, black plays rook a8, and well, after all, I think the position is about equality because even after c3, for example, black can play c5, and variations such like bishop takes f6. Well, now again g takes f6 works, and then c takes d4. So this is enough. But also, just in general, after bishop takes f6, queen takes e4, c takes d4, c takes d4, bishop takes e5. Now d takes e5, rook takes f1, rook takes f1, and the rook d5. This kind of position is usually very difficult to win despite the extra pawn, because the king is very close, and in the endgame usually black has enough compensation. But we don't need this variation, because g takes f6 works well almost everywhere. So let's return to move number 13. Instead of bishop takes e6, white plays c3. Again, bishop e7, bishop g5. Here, for example, after short castle, bishop f4, black has no problems if he takes on c4. Now after queen takes c4, he can play queen d5. And after knight takes c4, he simply plays queen e6. Rook a, e1, and c5. Opening a little bit the position, and it's impossible for white to win the pawn e4 without allowing black to get any counterplay. So let's stick to bishop g5, short castle to rook a goes to e8, rook a, e1, bishop takes e4, queen takes e4, and queen d5. The queen stays very good on d5. Whenever the queen moves from c4, like back to e2, for example, the pawn a2 will hang. So rook f5 is an interesting attempt. But black can simplify the position. Queen takes c4, knight takes c4, knight to d5, rook takes f8, bishop takes f8. And here obviously white doesn't have enough. I don't think that actually he has anything at all. In my opinion, the position is absolutely equal. So this is actually, yeah, this is everything about variation with tens d4. So try to remember the difference. If you get the chance to put your queen to d6, then you play queen d6 in move number 10. And if white plays knight e5 instead of d4, then you play with queen h4, queen h3. But don't play queen h4 if the knight stays on c6. Okay, so this actually also concludes the whole section about knight c3, d5 line. And now in the next section I'll show you a backup variation when black plays, instead of d5, knight f6. This will happen in move number 5.